Eleanor, a woman of status and grace, is thrust into a whirlwind of emotions as her daughter, Lily, is saved from danger by a homeless man named Jacob. Grateful and indebted, Eleanor's life takes an even more unexpected turn when she asks Jacob to pose as her fiancé at her ex-husband's wedding. Watch as an unlikely hero steps into a world of luxury, challenges societal norms, and embarks on a transformative journey. Will their bond withstand the scrutiny and secrets that follow? And what surprises lie ahead as they face their pasts and build a future together? Eleanor sat on a bench in Central Park, her attention divided between the screen of her smartphone and the faint laughter of children playing nearby. Her mind was occupied with work emails, social events, and the ever-looming thought of her ex-husband's upcoming wedding. She sighed, adjusting her sunglasses and letting her gaze flicker to where her daughter, Lily, was playing. Lily, with her wild curls and bright blue dress, was a whirlwind of energy, darting between the swings and the slide, her laughter ringing through the air. Eleanor smiled softly, allowing herself a moment of pride and joy. But it was only a moment before her phone buzzed again, demanding her attention. As Eleanor responded to yet another email, she didn't notice Lily wandering closer to the edge of the park, where the fence opened onto a busy street. Cars zoomed by, their drivers oblivious to the little girl who was now chasing a butterfly, her tiny feet edging dangerously close to the curb. In that instant, time seemed to slow. Eleanor's heart leapt into her throat as she finally looked up and saw Lily step into the street. A car rounded the corner at a speed too fast for the area. Eleanor opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Out of nowhere, a figure lunged forward, scooping Lily up just as the car screeched to a halt, narrowly missing them. Eleanor's legs moved before her mind could catch up, and she ran towards them, her heart pounding wildly. When she reached Lily, the little girl was crying, clutching onto the man who had saved her. Eleanor knelt down, her eyes filled with tears of relief. "Oh my God, Lily! Are you okay? Are you hurt?" Lily shook her head, still sobbing but seemingly unharmed. Eleanor turned her attention to the man who was holding her daughter. He was tall and rugged, his clothes tattered and dirty, his face weathered and marked by hardship. His eyes, however, were gentle and kind as he carefully set Lily down. "Thank you," Eleanor managed to say, her voice shaking. "Thank you so much. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." "It's okay," the man interrupted softly. "I'm just glad she's safe." Eleanor took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I'm Eleanor," she said, extending her hand. "And this is Lily." The man hesitated before shaking her hand. "Jacob," he replied simply. Eleanor looked at him closely, noticing the dirt under his nails, the worn-out shoes, and the old backpack slung over his shoulder. It was clear he was homeless. Her heart ached with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. "Jacob, I don't know how to thank you properly," she said, sincerity filling her voice. "You saved my daughter's life." Jacob shrugged modestly. Anyone would have done the same. Eleanor doubted that. She glanced around, noticing for the first time that some of the other parkgoers were watching, their curiosity piqued. She felt a sudden wave of embarrassment but quickly pushed it aside. "Please, can I offer you something?" she asked. "Money, food, anything?" Jacob shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. Just keep an eye on her, okay?" "I will," Eleanor promised, her voice thick with emotion. "But I'd still like to help you." "Are you sure there's nothing you need?" Jacob seemed to consider her offer for a moment before nodding. "A meal would be nice," he admitted. "I haven't eaten today." Eleanor smiled, relieved. "Of course. There's a cafe just around the corner. Would you join us?" Jacob nodded, and they walked together towards the cafe, Lily clinging to Eleanor's hand. As they walked, Eleanor glanced at Jacob, her mind racing. She had so many questions but didn't want to overwhelm him. Inside the cozy cafe, the waitress gave Jacob a wary look, but Eleanor's commanding presence seemed to assure her. They found a table by the window, and Eleanor ordered for all of them. Lily, now calmer, sipped her juice quietly. "So, Jacob," Eleanor began, choosing her words carefully, "how long have you been on the streets?" Jacob finished for her, not unkindly. "A few years now. Lost my job, then my home. It's been rough, but I manage." Eleanor nodded, her heart aching for him. "It must be incredibly difficult." Jacob shrugged again. "It has its moments. But you get used to it. Find ways to survive." Eleanor was silent for a moment, thinking about her own life, so full of comfort and security. She couldn't imagine what Jacob had been through, the strength it must have taken to keep going. Their food arrived, and they ate in a comfortable silence for a while. Lily was already warming up to Jacob, showing him her favorite stuffed animal and chattering about her day at school. Jacob listened patiently, a small smile playing on his lips. "Lily seems like a wonderful kid," he said to Eleanor, genuine admiration in his voice. "She is," Eleanor agreed, her heart swelling with pride. "She's my everything." Jacob nodded, looking thoughtful. "You're lucky to have each other." Eleanor couldn't argue with that. As they finished their meal, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for this unexpected connection. She knew she couldn't let Jacob go back to the streets without trying to help him. "Jacob," she began hesitantly, "I know you said you don't need anything, but if there's any way I can help you get back on your feet, please let me know." Jacob looked at her, his eyes searching hers for any hint of pity. Finding none, he sighed. "I appreciate that, Eleanor. Really. It's hard to accept help after all this time." Eleanor reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "Everyone needs a little help sometimes. And you just saved my daughter's life. Let me do something for you." Jacob smiled, a genuine, albeit weary smile. "Okay. Maybe we can start with finding me a job." Eleanor's face lit up. "Absolutely. I'll see what I can do." As they left the cafe, Eleanor felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had a lot to think about, especially with her ex-husband's wedding approaching, but for now, she focused on helping Jacob. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would change all their lives in ways they could never have imagined. Eleanor sat at her dining room table, the wedding invitation staring back at her like a bad omen. The elaborate cursive on the expensive cardstock spelled out the details of her ex-husband's impending nuptials to his new, much younger fiancé. She sighed heavily, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Lily was upstairs, tucked safely into bed, and the house was unusually quiet. Eleanor's mind drifted back to Jacob. Over the past few days, she had been trying to help him as much as she could, but finding a job for a man with no address or recent work history proved challenging. They had stayed in touch, meeting for coffee and meals, slowly building a tentative friendship. Eleanor's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden inspiration. She picked up her phone and dialed Jacob's number, hoping he was still at the shelter where he said he'd be staying for a few nights. "Hello?" Jacob's voice was cautious, as if he expected bad news. "Jacob, it's Eleanor. I hope I'm not bothering you." "No, not at all. Is everything okay?" "Yes, well, no. I mean, everything's fine, but I need to ask you something. It's a bit unconventional." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Go ahead," Jacob said finally. "I received an invitation to my ex-husband's wedding. It's in a week, and I really don't want to go alone. It would be uncomfortable, to say the least. I was wondering if you might consider accompanying me as my fiancé." Silence hung between them, the kind that feels like an eternity. Eleanor could almost hear Jacob processing her request. "Your fiancé?" he repeated, disbelief coloring his tone. "Yes, I know it sounds crazy. But it would only be for a day, and I could offer you a significant amount of money in return. Enough to help you get back on your feet, at least for a while." Jacob chuckled softly, a sound that was more thoughtful than amused. You want me to pretend to be your fiancé at your ex's wedding? For a day? Yes, Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. I can't face them alone. Jacob sighed. Eleanor, I don't know. This is a lot to ask. I understand, she said quickly. It's completely up to you. I just thought, you've been so kind, and I trust you. It's probably a terrible idea. No, Jacob interrupted. It's not a terrible idea. It's just unexpected. But if it means that much to you, I'll do it. Eleanor felt a rush of relief. Thank you, Jacob. I can't tell you how much this means to me. Let's meet tomorrow to go over the details. I'll help you get ready, and we can plan everything out. All right, Jacob agreed. Tomorrow it is. Good night, Eleanor. Good night, Jacob. The next day, they met at a small cafe near the park. Eleanor had brought a few shopping bags with clothes and shoes for Jacob. He looked at the bags, then back at Eleanor, an eyebrow raised. What's all this? He asked. A makeover, she said with a smile. If you're going to be my fiancé, you need to look the part. Jacob chuckled, shaking his head. All right, let's see what you've got. They spent the morning shopping and preparing. Eleanor took Jacob to a barber for a haircut and shave, and by the end of the day, he looked like a completely different person. Clean-shaven and dressed in a sharp suit, Jacob stood in front of a mirror, hardly recognizing himself. Wow, he muttered. I almost forgot what I looked like under all that. Eleanor smiled warmly. You clean up nicely, Jacob. He turned to face her, a grateful look in his eyes. Thank you, Eleanor. For everything. This is more than I ever expected. It's the least I can do, she replied. You saved Lily's life. And you're helping me with something very important. I just want you to feel confident. Jacob nodded, his expression serious. I'll do my best. The day of the wedding arrived, and Eleanor's nerves were on edge. She and Jacob had rehearsed their story, making sure every detail was believable. They arrived at the venue, a grand hotel ballroom, and Eleanor took a deep breath before stepping out of the car. Jacob offered his arm, and she took it gratefully. Together, they walked into the ballroom, heads turning to watch them enter. Eleanor's ex-husband, Richard, stood near the entrance, his eyes widening in surprise as he saw them. Eleanor, Richard said, recovering quickly. And who is this? This is Jacob, my fiancé, Eleanor said, her voice steady. Jacob, this is Richard. Jacob extended his hand, and Richard shook it, a polite but skeptical smile on his face. Nice to meet you, Jacob. I hadn't heard that Eleanor was engaged. It's a recent development, Jacob said smoothly. We've been keeping it private. Richard nodded, though his eyes lingered on Jacob, a hint of suspicion there. Well, congratulations. Enjoy the wedding. Thank you, Eleanor said, her grip tightening on Jacob's arm. We will. They moved through the crowd, Eleanor introducing Jacob to various friends and acquaintances. As the evening progressed, Jacob's genuine nature and quick wit won many over, but some were suspicious of his sudden appearance in Eleanor's life. During a quiet moment, Jacob and Eleanor stood together, watching the newlyweds dance. You're doing great, Eleanor whispered. So are you, Jacob replied. I think we've convinced them. Eleanor nodded, her eyes misting with gratitude. I couldn't have done this without you, Jacob. Thank you. Jacob smiled, a warm, genuine smile. Anytime, Eleanor. Anytime. As the night drew to a close, Richard approached them once more, a curious look on his face. Jacob, I couldn't help but notice you seem familiar. Have we met before? Jacob stiffened slightly, but Eleanor stepped in. Jacob used to work in finance, like you. Maybe you crossed paths at some point. Maybe, Richard said, still looking thoughtful. Well, I hope to see more of you both in the future. Of course, Eleanor replied, her smile unwavering. As they left the wedding, Eleanor felt a sense of triumph and relief. She had faced her fears and come out stronger. And Jacob, her unlikely savior, had proven to be more than just a hero. He was becoming a friend. Back at Eleanor's home, she turned to Jacob. I don't know how to thank you enough. Jacob shook his head. You've already done more for me than I could ever repay. This was just one day, but it means a lot. Eleanor smiled softly. Maybe it's the start of something more. For both of us. Jacob nodded, hope flickering in his eyes. Maybe it is. As they said their goodbyes, Eleanor knew this was only the beginning. She had no idea where this journey would take them, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. And she wasn't alone. The day of the wedding arrived with a clear blue sky and the scent of fresh flowers in the air. Eleanor woke up early, her nerves buzzing with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. She carefully selected her dress, a deep emerald green that complemented her eyes, and spent extra time on her makeup, aiming for a look that was elegant but understated. Jacob arrived promptly, looking every bit the part of a sophisticated fiancé. His transformation was remarkable, and Eleanor couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. They exchanged a few words of encouragement before heading out to the wedding venue. The Grand Hotel ballroom was a sight to behold, decorated with white roses and gold accents. Eleanor took a deep breath as they walked in, her arm linked with Jacob's. Heads turned, and she could feel the curious gazes of the guests, but she kept her chin high, determined to see this through. As they made their way through the crowd, Eleanor spotted Richard standing with his new bride, Vanessa. Richard's eyes widened in surprise as he saw Eleanor and Jacob approaching. He quickly masked his reaction with a polite smile. Eleanor, Richard greeted, his voice cordial but guarded. And this must be Jacob. Yes, this is Jacob, Eleanor confirmed, her voice steady. Jacob, this is Richard. Jacob extended his hand with a confident smile. Nice to meet you, Richard. Congratulations on your wedding. Thank you, Richard replied, shaking Jacob's hand. His gaze shifted between them, curiosity and suspicion mingling in his eyes. So, how did you two meet? Eleanor had anticipated this question. We met at a charity event, she said smoothly. Jacob is very involved in community work. Is that so? Richard said, clearly intrigued. What kind of work do you do, Jacob? Jacob met Richard's gaze with calm confidence. I've been involved in various projects, mostly focused on helping the homeless and underprivileged. It's something I'm very passionate about. Richard nodded slowly, seemingly impressed. That's admirable. It's always good to give back. Vanessa, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. It's lovely to meet you both. Eleanor, you look stunning. Thank you, Vanessa, Eleanor replied, forcing a smile. You look beautiful as well. Congratulations to you both. As they moved away from the newlyweds, Eleanor let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Jacob gave her arm a reassuring squeeze. You're doing great, he whispered. They mingled with the other guests, Jacob's natural charm and easygoing manner quickly winning people over. He shared stories of his supposed work, all carefully crafted by Eleanor, and listened attentively to the guests' anecdotes. Eleanor watched him with a mix of admiration and gratitude. He was doing far more than just playing a part, he was genuinely connecting with people. During a quiet moment, they found themselves standing by the edge of the dance floor, watching as Richard and Vanessa shared their first dance as a married couple. The soft strains of the music filled the room, creating a romantic and slightly melancholic atmosphere. You know, Jacob said softly, you're stronger than you think. Eleanor turned to him, surprised by the comment. What do you mean? You've handled all of this with such grace, Jacob continued. Facing your ex-husband, coming here today. It takes a lot of courage. Eleanor smiled, touched by his words. "Thank you, Jacob. I couldn't have done it without you." Jacob's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the noise and chaos of the wedding seemed to fade away. "I'm glad I could help," he said sincerely. As the evening progressed, they continued to navigate the social minefield of the wedding. Eleanor introduced Jacob to various friends and acquaintances, all of whom were impressed by his poise and genuine nature. She felt a sense of pride each time someone commented on what a wonderful couple they made. Towards the end of the night, Richard approached them again, this time with a glass of champagne in hand. "Jacob," he began, his tone more relaxed, "I have to admit, I'm curious about something." Jacob raised an eyebrow, his expression open and friendly. "What's that?" Richard took a sip of his champagne, choosing his words carefully. "You seem familiar. Have we met before?" Jacob remained calm, a slight smile playing on his lips. "I don't believe so, Richard. Though, with all the events and gatherings in this city, it's possible our paths have crossed." Richard nodded, still looking thoughtful. "Perhaps. Well, I hope we see more of you both in the future." "Eleanor, it's been good to see you." "You too, Richard," Eleanor replied, her voice steady. "Congratulations again." As Richard walked away, Eleanor felt a wave of relief. She turned to Jacob, a grateful smile on her face. "You handled that perfectly." Jacob shrugged modestly. "Just telling the truth, or most of it, anyway." Eleanor laughed softly, the tension of the day finally beginning to dissipate. "I think we did it. We actually pulled it off." Jacob smiled warmly. "We make a pretty good team, don't we?" "Yes, we do," Eleanor agreed, feeling a deep sense of connection to him. "Thank you, Jacob, for everything." As the evening drew to a close, they stood outside the hotel, the cool night air a welcome relief. Eleanor looked up at the stars, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. "Jacob," she began, her voice soft, "I know this was just for today, but I'd like to keep in touch. If you're okay with that." Jacob looked at her, his eyes filled with warmth and sincerity. "I'd like that too, Eleanor." They stood there for a moment, the city buzzing around them, and Eleanor felt hopeful for the first time in a long time. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but with Jacob by her side, she felt ready to face them. As they said their goodbyes, Eleanor watched Jacob walk away, a sense of possibility blooming in her heart. This unlikely partnership had brought them together in the most unexpected way, and she was eager to see where this journey would take them next. The days following Eleanor's conversation with Richard were filled with a new sense of purpose. She and Jacob continued to grow closer, their bond strengthening with each passing day. Eleanor felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of belonging that was both comforting and exhilarating. One afternoon, Eleanor and Jacob met at a small cafe near the park where they had first met. The atmosphere was cozy, with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods filling the air. Eleanor took a sip of her latte, savoring the moment of peace. "You know," Jacob said, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking about what's next for me. I want to find steady work, something I can be proud of." Eleanor smiled, setting her cup down. "That's great, Jacob. Have you thought about what kind of job you'd like?" Jacob nodded thoughtfully. "I used to be in finance, but after everything that's happened, I think I'd like to do something more meaningful. Maybe work with a nonprofit or an organization that helps people like me." Eleanor's eyes lit up. "That sounds perfect. I have some contacts in the nonprofit sector. Let me make a few calls." As they discussed potential job leads, Eleanor felt a growing sense of admiration for Jacob. His resilience and determination were inspiring, and she was grateful for the unexpected bond they had formed. However, their newfound friendship faced an unexpected challenge when one of Eleanor's friends, Claire, invited her to lunch. Claire was a close friend of Richard's and had been at the wedding. Eleanor knew she had to tread carefully. They met at an upscale restaurant, The kind of place where the waitstaff knew your name and your favorite wine. Claire greeted Eleanor with a hug and a smile, but Eleanor could sense an underlying tension. "So, Eleanor," Claire began after they ordered, "I couldn't help but notice your new beau at the wedding. Jacob, right?" Eleanor nodded, trying to keep her expression neutral. "Yes, Jacob. He's wonderful, isn't he?" Claire tilted her head, a hint of skepticism in her eyes. "He certainly made an impression. But I have to admit, I'm curious. Where did you two meet?" Eleanor had anticipated this question and had their story ready. "We met at a charity event a few months ago. He's very involved in community work." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Really? I asked Richard about him, and he said he couldn't find any information on Jacob. No social media, no LinkedIn. It's like he doesn't exist." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her voice steady. "Jacob is a very private person. He's not one for social media. And with his background, he prefers to keep a low profile." Claire leaned in, her tone conspiratorial. "Eleanor, you know I care about you. I just want to make sure you're not being taken advantage of. Richard is concerned too." Eleanor forced a smile, her frustration mounting. "I appreciate your concern, Claire, but I assure you, Jacob is genuine. He's been through a lot, and I'm helping him get back on his feet." Claire's expression softened slightly. "If you're sure, then I trust you. Just be careful, okay?" "Of course," Eleanor said, relieved that the interrogation was over. But the conversation left her feeling uneasy. She knew that Claire and Richard wouldn't stop digging until they found out the truth. She had to be prepared for whatever might come next. A few days later, Eleanor received a call from Richard. He sounded unusually cordial, but she could sense the underlying tension. "Eleanor, can we meet for coffee? There's something I'd like to discuss." Eleanor agreed, her stomach knotting with anxiety. They met at a cafe downtown, a neutral territory where they could talk without drawing too much attention. Richard was already seated when she arrived, a serious expression on his face. "Eleanor, thank you for meeting me." "Of course," she replied, sitting down opposite him. "What's this about?" Richard took a deep breath. "It's about Jacob. I've been doing some research, and I found out that he was homeless. He's not who he says he is." Eleanor's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her composure. "I know about Jacob's past, Richard. He was honest with me from the beginning. He's been through a lot, and he's trying to turn his life around." Richard looked taken aback. "You knew? And you still brought him to the wedding?" "Yes, I did," Eleanor said firmly. "Jacob saved Lily's life. He's a good man, and he deserved a chance. I needed someone by my side, and he was there for me." Richard's expression softened slightly, but he still looked troubled. "I understand that he saved Lily, and I'm grateful for that. But don't you think it's risky to involve him in your life like this?" Eleanor shook her head. "No, I don't. Jacob is a good person, and he's been nothing but kind and supportive. I trust him, Richard. And I hope you can respect that." Richard sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I just want what's best for you, Eleanor. If you believe in Jacob, then I'll try to respect that. But please, be careful." "I will," Eleanor promised, feeling a sense of relief. "Thank you, Richard." As they parted ways, Eleanor felt a renewed sense of determination. She knew that people would talk and that some would never understand her decision, but she didn't care. She believed in Jacob, and she was determined to help him rebuild his life. Later that evening, she met Jacob at the park, where Lily was playing on the swings. She told him about her conversation with Richard, and he listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. "I'm sorry if all of this has caused you trouble," Jacob said, his voice filled with sincerity. Eleanor shook her head. "You've caused me no trouble, Jacob. In fact, you've helped me more than you know. People are just curious. They don't understand. Jacob nodded, a hint of a smile on his lips. Well, I'm grateful for everything you've done for me, Eleanor. And I promise, I won't let you down. Eleanor smiled, feeling a deep sense of connection and trust. I know you won't, Jacob. We're in this together. As they watched Lily play, the sun setting behind them, Eleanor felt a sense of peace. Despite the challenges and the doubts of others, she knew she had made the right choice. Jacob was not just a partner in her charade, he was becoming an important part of her life, and she was ready to face whatever came next, as long as they faced it together. The weeks following Eleanor's conversation with Richard were filled with a new sense of purpose. She and Jacob continued to grow closer, their bond strengthening with each passing day. Eleanor felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of belonging that was both comforting and exhilarating. One crisp autumn morning, Eleanor decided to take Lily and Jacob to her family's cabin by the lake for a weekend getaway. She wanted to escape the city and spend some uninterrupted time with the two people who had become most important to her. The cabin was a cozy retreat, surrounded by towering pine trees and overlooking a serene, crystal-clear lake. As they arrived, Lily squealed with delight, running towards the water's edge. "Mommy, can we go fishing?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Of course, sweetheart," Eleanor replied, smiling. She turned to Jacob. "What do you think? Are you up for some fishing?" Jacob grinned, his eyes twinkling with the same enthusiasm. "Absolutely. It's been a long time since I've been fishing." They spent the morning on the lake, Jacob teaching Lily how to cast a line while Eleanor watched from the shore, her heart swelling with happiness. The sight of Jacob and Lily laughing together was a balm to her soul, a reminder of the beauty in simple moments. Later, as they sat around a campfire roasting marshmallows, Jacob shared stories from his past, opening up in a way he never had before. He spoke about his childhood, his dreams, and the hardships that had led him to where he was now. Eleanor listened intently, feeling a deep empathy for the struggles he had endured. "You've been through so much," she said softly, reaching out to take his hand. "But you're here now, and you're doing amazing things. I'm so proud of you, Jacob." Jacob squeezed her hand, his gaze steady and filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Eleanor. I couldn't have done it without you. You've given me hope when I had none." That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep in her room, Jacob and Eleanor sat on the porch, the night air cool and refreshing. The sky was a tapestry of stars, and the sound of crickets filled the silence between them. "Eleanor," Jacob began, his voice thoughtful, "I've been thinking a lot about our future. This past month has been incredible, and I feel like I've found a new family with you and Lily. But I don't want to just be a part of your life because you needed someone to pretend to be your fiancé. I want to be in your life because you want me there." Eleanor's heart raced as she looked into Jacob's eyes, seeing the sincerity and vulnerability there. She took a deep breath, her own feelings bubbling to the surface. "Jacob, when I asked you to help me with the wedding, I never imagined it would lead to this," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You stepped into my life and showed me what true kindness and strength look like. I didn't just need you for that one day. I need you every day. You've become so important to me and Lily. I want you in our lives, not as a pretend fiancé, but as someone we truly care about." Jacob's eyes shone with tears as he leaned in, capturing Eleanor's lips in a gentle, heartfelt kiss. It was a kiss that spoke of promise and new beginnings, a kiss that sealed their unspoken bond. The weekend at the cabin was a turning point for all of them. They returned to the city with a renewed sense of purpose and unity. Jacob found a job with a local nonprofit organization, helping to provide resources and support to homeless individuals. His own experiences gave him a unique perspective and empathy that made him an invaluable asset to the team. Eleanor, meanwhile, found herself more at peace than she had been in years. She continued to support Jacob, and their relationship deepened with each passing day. She saw the positive impact Jacob had on Lily, who adored him and often referred to him as her hero. One evening, as they were all sitting down to dinner, Jacob cleared his throat, a nervous yet excited look on his face. "I have something to ask you both," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. He turned to Lily first. "Lily, how would you feel if I became a permanent part of your family? Would you like that?" Lily's face lit up with joy. "Yes. Yes. I would love that," she exclaimed, jumping up to hug Jacob. Jacob then turned to Eleanor, taking her hand in his. "Eleanor, I never imagined my life could change so drastically in such a short time. You've given me love, hope, and a sense of belonging. I want to spend the rest of my life making you and Lily as happy as you've made me. Eleanor, will you marry me?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears of happiness as she nodded. "Yes, Jacob. Yes, I will marry you." The weeks that followed were a blur of happiness and preparations. Eleanor and Jacob planned a small, intimate wedding, surrounded by their closest friends and family. The ceremony took place at the park where they had first met, a fitting symbol of their journey. As Eleanor walked down the aisle, holding Lily's hand, she felt a profound sense of joy and gratitude. She looked at Jacob, standing at the altar with a smile that radiated pure love, and knew that this was the beginning of a beautiful new chapter. When they exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. They promised to love and support each other through thick and thin, to cherish every moment and to build a life filled with love and laughter. As they kissed to seal their vows, the crowd erupted in applause, and Lily ran up to join them, wrapping her arms around their legs in a joyful embrace. Eleanor looked at Jacob, her heart overflowing with love. "We did it," she whispered. Jacob smiled, his eyes shining with tears. "Yes, we did. Together." Their journey had been unexpected and challenging, but it had led them to a place of true happiness. They had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and together, they had created a new beginning filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities.